Pleiadians said about that issue was back in 94, 95, they said that the 9 dimensions of consciousness was going to be fully activated in our environment by the end of the Mayan calendar. And I used to think that was 2012, but of course now that I'm working with Colum on it, I think the end of the calendar is coming next year. And so what the Pleiadians said is the Pleiadians said, quote, that anybody who isn't activated at a 9-dimensional level won't be here. And that has had all kinds of ramifications for me. I mean, I have questioned the Pleiadians a million times about this one. And they say things like, well, it just means that as you experience now, there may be all kinds of people all around you who just aren't there. And I experience that all the time, where people just literally, even though they're here, they're not really here, you know, that routine.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, but the Pleiadians also said that our ecosystem is going to regenerate in 2011 at the end of the Mayan calendar. Because, see, when 9 dimensions of consciousness is fully activated on this planet, then what happens is the dimensions go back into their integrity. Like when that happens, then what happens is the sound creates the right geometry, and then it creates the right patterns in our dimension. And then the second dimension is able to transmute. Now, something really strange is going on right now. I'm sure that you're keeping track of the reports from the Gulf. And there are many, many signs that a very, very rapid level of transmutation is going on. Now, oil is a second-dimensional entity because, of course, they get it deep within the earth. And so when you bring oil into the third dimension, it's toxic because it actually belongs in the second dimension. However, something is going on right now which is causing a rapid transmutation of the oil. And this may be an early sign of the dimensions starting to go back into their integrity.
Well, you know, it seems that that the original blueprint was probably designed to be harmonic, and at some point there was a distortion introduced, which you bring out in your book, Catastrophobia, that you know, remained in our cellular and maybe even atomic memory, and that has really allowed others, let's just say, other selves of ourselves, other aspects of all that is, to use that moment to control us. So there's been a major distortion of all of these frequencies, and it seems as if what you're saying and what others are saying is that we're moving into a harmonic frequency in a higher octave, which would be the white hole, which we're presently headed towards from our universe of 9 dimensions through the center of the black hole, which is the singularity where nothing exists, and then we're stretching out into infinity and moving into the white hole, which is the higher universe where most likely the Pleiadians and others already are waiting.
Yeah. You mastered that one pretty well. Did you know about that material very much before you got into this book?
I knew about parts of it from other experiences I've had, you know, experiencing this directly. And I actually had an experience of going through a black hole where I was aware, and then I saw and felt energetically this wave coming towards me, and I thought, oh no. And then as it hit me, every cell of my body stretched out, and my feet went out into infinity. And it felt like I was just stretched infinitely both ways. And then I turned into a kind of sheet of glass in the other dimensions, and then I lost consciousness. And so when I read that page about what it might be like, according to quantum physicists, to go into a black hole, that one's feet would go first and stretch out, I thought, oh my God.
Right. And as you know, a lot of that material comes from Ishtak Bentov, who was a really incredible scientific researcher back in the 70s in he was living in San Francisco when I was there, and I never met him, but I heard about him constantly. Just people were going over and spending time with him and all that. He had a really beautiful, simple way of explaining extremely complicated cosmology.
Well, you know, it seems like it should be fairly simple, and we've just been so confused and pointing in so many different directions, and that's just the nature of the duality. But as we move into a harmonic reality that is not duality related, but polarized, and moving out of that into unity of all frequencies, that it seems that the vibration will shift. We'll be able to see vibrations with our third eye, I guess.
Okay, well, let's get a little bit more practical.
Okay,
because
good.
I think we've got a really good sense of where we're headed, but the question is, how's that going to affect everybody?
Oh, and yes, yes.
Yeah, and so back to that image of the person on the table and being in a multidimensional field. What happens for us when we start to open up these energetic portals that we have, and you've obviously had a lot of experience with this, is that emotional blocks that we have not yet solved, psychological complexes, judgments that we're holding, all of the different patterns that we're holding where we haven't really healed ourselves, what happens is those patterns start busting wide open. And so one of the things that's been happening for people, especially since 1999, is just tremendously difficult levels of deep emotional healing and physical healing. I know that everybody who's listening to us have had different sessions and different healing modalities in order to help themselves. And what I'd like to mention at this point is this process is going to get to be really intense starting in September, because first of all, we're starting to approach the end of the calendar and day 7 in the universal underworld, so that the acceleration factor this fall and winter is just going to be mind-boggling. But wow. The other part of the situation is that Chiron and Neptune will be traveling less than 1 degree apart in the sky from September of 2010 through March of 2011. And ooh. People may not be familiar with Chiron. Chiron is a little body that astronomers argue about that orbits between Saturn and Uranus. And I wrote a book about Chiron around 25 years ago. And Chiron rules the process of getting into the deepest level of wounding. And the image that we use for Chiron is to think of an onion. Think of yourself as an onion. And when you start going into a healing and waking up process, what happens is you keep working through layers and getting closer and closer to the center of the onion. And then when you finally gotten to the very deep core center of yourself, then you have cleared the wounds and you are a healed person. And so because Chiron and Neptune are together in the sky, what's happening is we're having experiences of going inside and healing a block. And then the minute we go inside and heal the block, we explode open into illumination and into spiritual contact. And it's just because Neptune rules spirituality and Chiron rules wounding. But this fall and winter, and it's appropriate, when you think of the frequencies that we apparently are going to be experiencing according to Kalaman, the accelerated frequencies, then it makes sense that the planets would be working with us in this way. But I would like to say that this is just incredibly intense. And for people who know what I'm talking about, you've had a lot of these kinds of experiences, especially during the last 3 or 4 years, and especially this last year. But the real mind-boggling, most intense part of it starts with I know.
Yeah.
And that's only part of the astrology. The astrology that's going on right now is just some of the most amazing astrology that certainly I've ever seen.
Well,
right now at this moment, it's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to share a little bit about that? Because we're in a T-square, aren't we?
We're in the middle of what's called the cardinal crunch. I don't remember which astrologer came up with that name, but I really like it. And cardinal means cardinal signs. And the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And so when planets are in cardinal signs, that's when you're in first gear and you've just floored your car and you basically, go 20 miles an hour in 5 seconds. That's what cardinal signs are like. They're full bore, let's get into the energy. And so right now we have Uranus and Jupiter in Aries, conjunct in Aries, and then they're opposing Saturn and Mars in Libra, and then they're T-squaring Pluto in Capricorn. And so what this means is that with Saturn opposite Uranus, and we had an exact Saturn opposite Uranus on July 26th, whenever we have Saturn opposite Uranus, we have tremendous transformation and change in structural things on the planet. Then if you throw Jupiter in it, that magnifies the whole thing. Then if you throw Mars into it, it intensifies the energy. And all of that change and transformation is pushing on Pluto. And Pluto is, as you know, is the god of the underworld. And Pluto is the dude who gets in there and makes you change no matter what. And Pluto operates on many levels. Pluto can be a very dark force, and Pluto can be a highly spiritualized transmutation force. One of the images for Scorpios, when we think of Scorpios, we think of the snake or the eagle or the phoenix. And the reason we use those three images is because plutonic forces operate in a very dark level or on a very high ethereal level. And so then Capricorn rules structures and the basic formation of reality. And so we're in the middle of the deepest, most formative level of structural change that certainly has ever happened on our planet, for sure. And all of this is going to continue this fall. This is happening as we go into the end of the calendar. Really amazing astrology.
Well, it sure feels like something big is happening.
Yeah,
and then, in addition to that, don't we move from the Mayan 6th night into the 7th day in November?
Yeah, we move into the 7th day, November 2nd, November 3rd, and I'm really, really excited about that because we've been in the middle of night 6 for the last year, and night 6 of any one of the underworlds is always a very, very tough energy.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know about you, but I'm happy. And another thing about night 6, one of the things that we do with time acceleration theory is we can look back into the previous underworlds to see what was going on before now, and we can kind of predict what's going to be happening in the current moment. And so if we go back into some of the older underworlds, like if we go back into the national underworld, which is a 5,125-year cycle, that one goes from 3,115 BC up through 2011, and that's the cycle of civilization. And so if we go back into night 6 of the national underworld, we hit the Inquisition. And we hit the period when the European powers went over and conquered the indigenous people in North and South America. Very, very difficult period historically. Yeah. Then we can even go back earlier than that into the 100,000-year underworld. The underworld before the national is called the regional, and it's basically the Paleolithic period. And when we go back into the previous underworld, guess what we hit resonating with us right now? The cataclysm.
I don't know.
The cataclysm.
Oh.
Yeah, right. So in my case on my website, I keep track of all this. A lot of people tell me that they love that website because they don't have to keep track of all this stuff. Because I've been sitting here reading history books, and anthropology and archaeology in order to figure out what was going on before. And so the very day, the peak of the cataclysm in our solar system was 9,500 BC. That's 11,500 years ago. And 9,500 BC is, in terms of time acceleration of the calendar, it's this basic same resonation as April 20th, 2010. So when the oil spill happened, I like calling it the oil volcano, I knew how serious it was. And I don't know whether it's going to end up being as destructive as it might possibly be, but what I can say to you is that it was the perfect event to get people to resonate with the sense of catastrophe on our planet. It caused a mass awakening on the part of the people on our planet to the danger to the ecosystem and the danger of destroying our reality. So that's kind of how time acceleration works.
Wow. And then, of course... Go ahead.
We just got a couple of more months of this, and then when we get into November, then things are going to improve greatly.
Well, isn't that when you said Chiron and Neptune are activated? Yeah.
In other words, we're individually going to be continuing to have these intense healing experiences. But what we're looking at here in terms of the days and nights of the underworld, we're looking at the collective path of evolution. And so in order to understand what might be happening in November of this year, you have to understand what the whole galactic underworld is about. So
yeah.
I don't know how much your listeners know about these various underworlds.